Hello everyone, welcome back to Whodunit, the channel that dives deep into the most chilling true crime case. Today we're uncovering the heartbreaking and mysterious story of a young, beautiful woman named Taylor Pomaski. So let's explore this case together. On April 26, 2021, in Harris County, Texas, Stephen Pomaski sat quietly by the phone. Mondays were usually the day his daughter, 29-year-old Taylor Pomaski, would call, just to ask one simple question: "Dad, how are you?" But that day, the line stayed silent. No text, no call, only an absence heavy enough to chill the air. Taylor, a young woman, full of warmth, carrying her family with both strength and tenderness, suddenly vanished. As the eldest daughter, she wasn't just a sister. She was a protector, a confidant, the glue that kept everyone together. And she was inseparable from her dogs. To Taylor, leaving them behind would have been like abandoning her own heart. Just one day earlier, she had been seen at a house party in Spring with friends and her boyfriend, Kevin Ware Jr., a former NFL player, once cheered on in stadiums. Amid the laughter, the drinks, and the haze of smoke, a bitter argument erupted. Kevin later claimed that Taylor stormed out, climbed into a strange car filled with men, and disappeared. But his story was riddled with holes. Her mother, Leslie, insisted my daughter would never leave without her dogs. That single detail cracked the surface of his version, turning concern into suspicion. Where had Taylor gone on that fateful night? Why did the man who claimed to love her sound so detached? And if the truth was hidden behind his cold, practiced words, what would be the cost when it finally came to light on April 26, 2021? As the sun dipped behind the suburban rooftops of Spring, Texas, the Pomaski family slipped into a nightmare no one could have foreseen. Taylor, the gentle, warm-hearted daughter who had never left her parents, worried for more than a day, had suddenly disappeared. Stephen called. Leslie, Taylor's mother, called as well. But every signal dissolved into silence. The phone was off. No messages. No trace. For some families, this might have been dismissed as a young woman needing space. But for Taylor, who lived tethered to her family and her beloved dogs, the silence was an alarm bell that couldn't be ignored. Leslie decided to reach out to Kevin Ware Jr., the man Taylor was living with. Kevin's voice over the line was steady, almost rehearsed, but disturbingly detached. He said he hadn't seen Taylor since April 25th. They had argued at a house party, and she walked out climbing into a car filled with men before vanishing into the night. On the surface, it sounded plausible. A couple fights, a woman storms off. But Leslie knew one thing made that story impossible. Taylor would never abandon her dogs. Not in sorrow, not in anger. For Taylor, they were family. To leave them behind was unthinkable. At first, investigators leaned toward the simplest explanation. At 29, Taylor was an adult fully capable of walking away if she chose to. But Leslie's conviction planted doubt in their minds. And then when detectives sifted through Taylor's emails, another name emerged: Eric Zuliger. Only hours before she disappeared, Taylor had sent Eric a desperate message begging to see him. Eric wasn't just anyone. He was her ex-boyfriend of 6 years. Suddenly, Kevin's story of Taylor leaving in a car with men no longer seemed far-fetched. Detectives turned their focus on Eric. But the moment Eric was contacted, suspicion began to unravel. He didn't avoid the police. He came straight to the station, handing over the very email Taylor had sent, along with texts and screenshots. Calmly, he explained their history. They had parted ways, yes, but on good terms, and they remained close friends. More importantly, Eric revealed something that cut through the air like glass. Taylor had confided in him about Kevin. She told him about Kevin's reckless lifestyle, his substance abuse, his violent temper, and the suspension from his NFL career. She said she was preparing to leave him for good. Eric wasn't spinning a jealous tale. He had proof. Taylor's family backed him up. They too had read her messages, seen the fear between the lines, and recognized that she was planning to end things with Kevin, once and for all. Detectives circled back to Kevin's account. They interviewed the party guests one by one, and that's when the first real crack split open. Several guests swore that Taylor had never walked out of the house. After the shouting match with Kevin, she went upstairs pale and unsteady. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. No car, no strange men, just silence. What made it worse was the way most guests spoke, guarded, evasive, as if there was a dangerous truth none of them dared to tell. From that moment forward, investigators stopped calling it a disappearance. They began using a darker word, homicide. And the man at the center of it all was once again the same Kevin Ware Jr. As the case shifted from a disappearance to a suspected homicide, the air around the Pomaski family grew heavier. They clung to hope that Taylor was still alive somewhere, maybe in need of time and healing. But Leslie's instincts, the kind only a mother carries, screamed that something far darker had happened. Early in the investigation, the Harris County Sheriff's Office enlisted Texas EquiSearch, a nonprofit search and rescue team founded by Tim Miller. Volunteers combed through fields, creeks, ditches, and wooded lots. They stretched across 100 miles, walking shoulder to shoulder, scanning every inch of land. But what they found was nothing, just silence. And the more they searched, the more suffocating that silence became. Then, a chilling detail surfaced. A woman who had once been romantically involved with Kevin stepped forward. She claimed that shortly after Taylor vanished, Kevin had given her something unexpected: Taylor's dogs. This revelation struck investigators like a lightning bolt. Kevin had told Leslie that Taylor stormed off with her animals. Yet here they were, placed in the arms of another woman. It wasn't just a contradiction. It was a fracture in his carefully constructed facade. And it hinted at something even deeper: control, manipulation, an attempt to erase Taylor's presence piece by piece. In June 2021, the case twisted again. Kevin was arrested not for Taylor's disappearance, but for drugs and illegal firearms. Police caught him speeding at 115 miles an hour with cocaine, meth, and weapons in his vehicle. Initially released on bond, he violated his terms and soon found himself locked up again. Ironically, it was behind bars that Kevin's world began to crumble. The salons surrounding him fractured. People who had once kept quiet started talking, acquaintances, partygoers, even old friends. They painted a disturbing picture of the night Taylor was last seen. Witnesses described Kevin as intoxicated, fueled not only by alcohol, but also by substances that amplified his rage. In the middle of the party, he erupted into fury, screaming, throwing things, and brandishing a gun. One witness recalled Kevin's chilling words: "If anyone has a problem with the way I handle my business, let me know. I'll put a round in your skull." Then came another lead, one that carried the weight of horror. A man reported visiting a rural property owned by one of Kevin's acquaintances. There, in the charred earth of a recent fire, he saw a bone, large, unmistakably human. Inside the farmhouse, he noticed something even worse: a skull. Detectives moved quickly, securing warrants and connecting dots. When they pulled Kevin's phone records, the pieces snapped into place. Just hours after Taylor disappeared, Kevin had called the owner of that very farm. It was no longer speculation. The puzzle was aligning: the argument, the missing woman, the misplaced dogs, the threats at the party, and now a property where fire had burned too hot too long. The Pomaski family realized that hope was no longer enough. They weren't searching for Taylor alive. They were searching for the truth of how she had died. For investigators, one fact was undeniable. Kevin's web of lies was unraveling, and the trail of ash and silence was leading them straight to the heart of it. By December 2021, the investigation reached a turning point. Acting on multiple witness tips, Harris County investigators secured a warrant to search a rural farm in the northern part of the county. What they discovered there shook even the most seasoned detectives: scorched earth, fragments of charred bone, and the remains of a human skull. Everyone on scene knew instantly this was no ordinary fire pit. This was a graveyard of secrets, and it likely marked the brutal end of Taylor Pomaski's life. Forensic testing began, but justice takes time. The bones were badly damaged by both fire and exposure. Weeks turned into months as experts painstakingly extracted DNA. Finally, after more than 2 months of testing, the result confirmed what Taylor's family had feared most: the remains were hers. The confirmation shattered the thin thread of hope that had held the family together. For Leslie and Stephen, the nightmare was no longer about a missing daughter. It was about facing the reality of her violent death. And then a new voice surfaced: a woman who had spent just one night with Kevin. In her sworn statement, she revealed how, in a haze of drugs and euphoria, Kevin had let slip a confession. He told her that after the argument at the party, he had followed Taylor upstairs into the bathroom. Rage consumed him. He shoved her, beat her, and strangled her until she was gone. When the guests left, he wrapped her body, loaded it into his vehicle, drove to the farm, and set it ablaze. This was not a confession forced in an interrogation room. It was the kind of chilling slip that comes when arrogance meets intoxication, when a man believes his secrets are safe in the dark. But in that moment of weakness, Kevin betrayed himself. The psychology of Kevin Ware Jr. was on full display. Once a celebrated NFL athlete, he embodied the narcissistic fall from fame to infamy, from applause to addiction. He craved control, dominance, and the illusion that he could outwit everyone around him. But every lie, every manipulation, and every attempt to erase Taylor only tied the noose tighter around his own neck. Phone records sealed the connection. Hours after Taylor was last seen alive, Kevin contacted the very man who owned the farm where her remains were discovered. The timeline was undeniable. Yet when confronted again, Kevin's demeanor remained calm, dismissive. He denied every accusation. He claimed the woman fabricated her story, that the witnesses were unreliable, that he was being targeted because of his past. It was the same mask he had worn from the beginning, arrogance dressed up as indifference. But detectives knew his mask was slipping. They had the physical remains, the witnesses, the phone records, and now a chilling confession whispered in the wrong ear. The only thing left was to push Kevin into a corner he could no longer escape. The ashes had spoken, and in their silence, they told a story of rage, betrayal, and a fire meant to erase the truth, but instead one that illuminated it for all to see. By April 2022, when DNA testing confirmed that the charred bones belonged to Taylor Pomaski, the case could no longer be framed as speculation. What began as a missing persons report had become an undeniable homicide, a young woman's life stolen and her body reduced to ashes in a desperate attempt to hide the truth. Detectives had assembled a chain of evidence, witness accounts of the violent party, Kevin handing Taylor's dogs to another woman, phone records linking him to the farm, and the chilling late-night confession he spilled to a stranger. But evidence alone doesn't deliver justice. It must be sharpened into a weapon inside the courtroom. That task fell to prosecutor Samantha Necht. Samantha was no stranger to men like Kevin Ware Jr. She had stood across from powerful, arrogant defendants before men who believed their fame, their money, or their reputation could bend the law. She understood Kevin's psychology, a former NFL tight end, once adored by crowds accustomed to victories, allergic to losing. To break him, she wouldn't appeal to sympathy. She would speak his language, the language of competition. When Samantha finally sat across from Kevin, she didn't waste words. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, "We're going to play a game. You have 30 minutes. Plead guilty and serve 30 years, or roll the dice in court and spend the rest of your life behind bars." Then she walked out, leaving Kevin alone in Williamsey. For 20 minutes, the man who once threatened party guests with a gun, who believed he could erase a woman with fire, sat in wise calculation. He consulted with his lawyer, weighed his pride against reality, and finally crumbled. For the first time since Taylor vanished, he admitted the truth. In Harris County Court, Kevin Ware Jr. pleaded guilty to murder and to tampering with evidence. The sentence to 30 years in prison, a number that symbolized not only his downfall, but also the culmination of nearly a year of relentless pursuit by investigators, advocates, and Taylor's family. For the legal system, it was a victory. For the Pomaski family, it was a hollow one. Leslie clutched Taylor's graduation photo, her voice breaking. "Maybe justice has been served, but our pain will never end." Stephen, who had once waited for his daughter's Monday call, now knew the phone would remain silent forever. The public too was shaken. How could a man, once celebrated in the NFL, cheered on fields, adored in headlines, descend into drugs, violence, and ultimately murder? Kevin's story became a grim reminder of the corrosive power of arrogance, addiction, and unchecked rage. Justice was delivered, but the verdict left behind a haunting question. Does 30 years in prison truly balance the scales for a life so brutally stolen? Or is the real sentence carried by those who must go on, living with the void Taylor left behind? When the 30-year sentence was finally handed down in a Harris County courtroom, silence settled over the room like a heavy fog. Kevin Ware Jr., once a fairy cheered on football fields, was now condemned as a murderer. But for the Pomaski family, the gavel's echo did not bring closure. It only marked another chapter of grief. Leslie Taylor's mother wept as she spoke. "Maybe he's been sentenced. But for us, the pain will last forever." It wasn't just the loss of a daughter. It was the permanent scar left on a family's heart. Stephen, the father who once waited every Monday for his daughter's call, knew that the silence on the other end of the line would remain eternal. The symbol of fire, the very thing Kevin believed would erase the evidence, became the very element that betrayed him. Flames cannot consume justice. Lies cannot bury the truth. In the end, what he thought would protect him only illuminated the horror of his crime. But a deeper question lingers. What truly killed Taylor Pomaski? Was it Kevin's hands that ended her life? Or was it the toxic cycle of manipulation, violence, and silence that allowed the abuse to grow unchecked? Sometimes the real crime isn't only the fatal blow. It is the quiet complicity of those who choose not to see. Taylor's story is more than a tragedy. It is a warning, a reminder to listen for the subtle signs of toxic love, to trust intuition, and to never let silence shield the truth. Her name deserves to be remembered, not just as a victim, but as a voice that demands change. If Taylor's story moved you, share it. Let her memory live on by sparking conversations that matter. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime documentaries where we uncover not just the crimes, but the truths they leave behind.